Good afternoon and welcome to Today on Bay TV. I'm Liz Cairns and this is Keith Milward.
We are joined today by leading journalist Robert Llewellyn-Jones and Assembly member Mike Hedges.
Now, before we begin the show, we must say a big hello to viewer Church Warden Philip Evans of St Illtyd Church, Neath, who emailed the show to point out we had inadvertently made a mistake yesterday. We were describing the competition where St Illtyd Church was one of the 50 shortlisted, and what we had said was it had been built in 1850 when in fact it had been built in 1180.
Wow.
And for this we do apologise.
Only a slight discrepancy.
Yes, just slightly.
Oh, that's quite impressive, isn't it?
It was actually enlarged in 1850, so that's where the misunderstanding had been.
Oh, yes, beautiful church, isn't it? Look at that, the setting. So, let's go for a walk there with the dog.
Shall we go on with what's on this day?
Yeah.
Carry on.
Right. Okay. In 2015, CCTV images show Jeremy Corbyn walking past empty seats on a train before making a film sitting on the floor complaining about the ram-packed seats. Now, I'm sure everybody remembers this.
Yes.
Yes, do you remember?
Yes.
Should we have a quick look back?
Reminder.
This is a problem that many passengers face every day on the trains, commuters and long-distance travellers. Today this train is completely ram-packed. The staff on the train are absolutely brilliant, working really hard to help everybody. The reality is there's not enough trains, we need more of them, and they're also incredibly expensive. Isn't that a good case for public ownership?
Mike, do you think it was just a publicity stunt? What did you think?
Well, I think it's amazing he managed to get on a train which wasn't ram-packed, because most trains I get on are full. There's often only standing room, and some of the standing room is rather squashed. I mean, try coming on a Riva train down from the South Wales valleys, and you discover just how many people you can get into one very small space.
Yeah.
So I think that he was making a point, which is a very good one, and most commuters are aware of just how difficult it is to get a seat on a train, and people are also aware that having pre-booked it doesn't always mean that somebody isn't sitting there when you get to the seat.
Absolutely.
That's true.
And that's true. I've been party to seeing people stand all the way from Paddington virtually to Reading. And being in that situation of not being able to have the seat they booked. And that's Great Western.
I was very embarrassed 2 weeks ago when I had an American visitor and I got on the train in Bath and had to really sort of fight our way to get a seat for her, and she's an elderly lady, you know, so it was quite embarrassing, really.
And
you
safety
booked?
aspect as well.
Yes.
Oh.
I've never been on the Paddington train coming down where people haven't been standing until at least Reading, and sometimes to Swindon or Bristol.
Yes, absolutely right. Absolutely.
There has been and currently is a problem of not enough carriages. Too many people trying to get on train for the amount of carriages they've got.
Well, the electrification was meant to have changed that and helped that, so we'll see how that goes.
Well, hopefully it'll still come all the way to Swansea. We haven't given up.
Yeah, well, no, none of us have given up, definitely. And we wish, well, hopefully in a few years' time, or even next year, I doubt that, but in a few years' time, we'll be bringing that up on this day.
I hope so.
Yes. I'll hold you to that one. In 1946, born on this day, Keith Moon, drummer for The Who. And then Moon died on the 7th of September 1978, but will always be remembered for My Generation.
Oh, right.
They also played the Vetchfield in Swansea back in the 1970s.
Oh.
Stones.
No, the Who.
The Who.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, they played.
Yes.
It was one of the first really big concerts to come to Swansea. We were used to having quite small bands or bands on the way up, like Supertramp. But the Who were really a renowned band at the time, and they came to Swansea and they filled out the Vetchfield. Now we've got people coming to the Liberty Stadium, so progress is being made.
I remember my mother was working in Tesco's at the time, and people going to the concert all seemed to go to Tesco's all the same time, and so took so many things from the shelves. You know, don't pay for Tesco's.
Oh, they did pay for them, didn't they?
Well, I hope so, yes.
Should we watch a video of them?
Oh, yes.
Fade away. I said, don't try and dig what we all talking about my generation, trying to cause talking about my generation, talking about my generation, my generation.
Now,
A good name though, Keith, isn't it? A good name. It's got to be a good person. Yeah.
that clip obviously is iconic because when the drum blew up, sadly the guitarist Peter Townsend ended up deaf because the amount of explosives, I think, was highly over the amount it should have been, and then he ended up deaf.
Yeah.
All right.
My favourite Keith Moon story was when somebody said that with most rock stars, they exaggerate what they've done for effect. With Keith Moon, we have to tone it down because people won't believe it.
That's true. In 1980, David Bowie was at #1 on the UK singles chart with Ashes to Ashes. And his second story of Major Tom from Bowie's Space Oddity, and the video for Ashes to Ashes was one of the most iconic of 1980s and cost around $250,000, the most expensive music video ever made of its time, of course, because now I wonder how much they would be. Should we remind ourselves?
Oh, yes, I really like this.
It's a nice musical Wednesday on this day, isn't it?
It's definitely a musical day, a musical Wednesday.
Definitely. And obviously you all knew David Bowie and that.
Yeah.
And did you ever follow him? Did you like his music? Or?
I'm afraid I was more The Who, Led Zeppelin than I was David Bowie.
And Robert?
Isn't it wonderful to know we have such trendy men in Cardiff? I rest my case.
Are you saying no comment?
Well,
I liked the Man Who Sold the World. That was the one I liked because that was Lulu, wasn't it, with him. But I think I've got to like his music since that time. You know, it's grown on me. It's a quiet taste. Yes.
Not one I've acquired, I'm afraid.
In 1969, Johnny Cash started a 4-week run at #1 on the US album chart with Johnny Cash at San Quentin. Should we have a quick video of it?
Please do.
Come on then.
You cut me and you scarred me through and through, and I'll walk out a wiser. San Quentin, you've been living hell to me. You blistered me since 1963. I've seen them come and go, and I've seen them die. And long ago,
I think all the musicians we've had on today, they've all been iconic because they all artists I've never followed, but yet I recognise all their songs.
Yeah.
But Robert,
well, Johnny Cash was a great country and western singer, wasn't he?
Oh, yes.
And country and western had a vogue, and perhaps with the death of who was the guy who died the other day? Wichita lineman.
Oh, yes, with Campbell.
Campbell, yes. That sort of brought to an end perhaps the country and western pop.
And the music never dies, does it? You know, it's used in films, and there's been a film of his life.
And of course, Jim Reeves was the big voice of, I remember.
Yes. It's liked by so many, isn't it? Put your sweet lips a little closer to the phone.
Because I was never into country and western genre at all, but like I said, I recognised his songs.
Yes,
and I could sing along with them with all the words, so...
Yeah, you could be prosecuted for that now.
It's the females.
Not that loud.
It's the females like Crystal Gale and Tammy Wynette and Dolly Parton. Love them.
Oh, Dolly Parton, definitely.
Oh, great. But it's such enjoyable music, which, as I say, will never die.
No.
And
Definitely not. Well, thank you both. And we're going to, later on in the next part, look at the papers.
see you later.
Welcome back to Bay TV. I'm Liz Cairns and this is Keith Milward. We're with journalist Robert Llewellyn Jones and Mike Hedges AM.
Oh, come on, Liz, let's hear what's in the papers, though, please.
Well, we have plenty of news with regards to beginning with the princes.
Oh, yes.
4 of the main pages cover these in their headlines. The Daily Express, he was there for us. William and Harry reveal how grieving Charles helped them to cope with Diana's death. In the Metro, Harry, leave my dad alone. Charles did his best. He was grieving too. I'm very glad I walked behind my mum's coffin. In the Daily Mirror, the Princess Torment. Dad told us her mother had died. In the Daily Mail, the Princess moment. Daddy told us Mummy was dead. William and Harry gave extraordinary new TV interview. They revealed Charles did comfort them over Diana's death and talk of their bewilderment at the scale of public grief. Now, there is so much being said about this, and the fact that they are bringing out this new interview, which I think is going to be at the end of the week. What people, I think, tend to forget in conversations is that these are human beings and they were children when their mother died. It's a normal child has lost their mother, irrelevant to the circumstances around it. They're still children who lost their mother. How do you feel about that and what's going on at the moment?
I very much agree with you. I think that what you're talking about, these young children who were living with their mother, whose mother just died, and it must become a terrible shock to them and a level of bewilderment. I mean, we expect older people to die, and most of us expect that our parents, as mine did, will die before us, but we'd like them to die in their 70s, 80s and 90s, not in their 30s. It must have become a huge shock to them, and I think everybody must feel for young children who've lost their parent.
Yeah.
Of course, the difference was that they were in such a public show, weren't they? You know, but it's devastating.
Was there any need for Diana to be in Paris at that time with Fayed? Is this the action of perhaps a parent with 2 children that she leaves them and then goes off for a weekend in Paris with a boyfriend? I don't know. I mean, why don't they sanctify Diana now and have done with it? She could be there with Mother Teresa and the other great ladies.
It was devastating for us all with the news, but it must have been so devastating for the 2 boys. I know there is a film that we'd like to show, isn't there? Yes. So just to remind us of those days.
Sadly, even the funeral in itself was held as controversial because the boys walked behind the coffin. Originally there were statements where I don't think they really wanted to, but it was part of the formality. But now they have come out and said that they were pleased that they did it. Whether in reflection when they were older, they've realised that yes, it was a good thing that they walked behind their mother. Who knows? Because we don't really know what they're actually saying and what's in their minds.
Does it really matter?
No.
What do you think, as a politician?
I think that it must have been incredibly difficult for them to do whatever they did. If they'd walked behind it, if they'd just been in the church, if they'd just walked alongside, whatever they did was going to be incredibly difficult. I mean, the emotion of losing your parent is awful. Losing a parent as a child is something which I find inconceivable, and I think that anything they did was going to hurt. But because the hurt was really losing their mother.
Yes.
Anything else was probably of very little significance in their lives at that moment, whether they walked behind it or not, or whether they just stayed in their bedroom and cried. I mean, which was probably their first reaction.
Probably weren't allowed because it was in such public eye. And I think what keeps being forgotten now, these days, when Diana's name is brought up, is all the good that she has done. she did so much, didn't she?
Yes.
She went out of her way to make sure to look after people and to raise money within charities and that never seems to be mentioned anymore.
I think the one thing she did, I mean, people with AIDS were considered the untouchables, and that being in the same room with them, breathing the same air, was likely to get you ending up with AIDS. And her willingness to go in and touch and be friendly with people who were suffering with AIDS really had a change in attitude towards people with AIDS at that time. Where they were now seen as human beings suffering a disease rather than some sort of latter-day leper.
Yeah, definitely.
I remember those sombre days, though, thinking of the film we've shown, and, you know, we were all so saddened, and, you know, we were waiting all the time to hear a response from the Queen. And I remember that at the time I was directing a musical, Little Night Music in Swansea, and in rehearsal we found it so difficult to motivate ourselves to actually rehearse. But yes, such sad times.
We're going to move on now to the Evening Post. Our little Welsh star, she's not a little Welsh star, bless her, she's a huge star, but she's our Welsh, born and bred. Bonnie's hit totally eclipses US chart. It's the headlines, as you can see. After playing her song, Total Eclipse of the Heart, on the cruise ship, whilst obviously it was a solar eclipse, it has now become #1 hit on the iTunes of the US charts.
Oh.
Shall we have a video?
Oh, yes.
Every now and then I get a little bit helpless, lying like a child in your arms. Every now and then I get a little bit angry, I know I've got to get out inside. Every now and then I get a little bit terrified, then I see the look in nothing I can do, total eclipse of the heart.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Fair play.
We were talking
Bonnie
about great
Tyler.
singers earlier. I think you could put Bonnie Tyler into that list of great singers.
Oh,
Definitely.
Love it.
I'm going to move on now onto the BBC News. This was actually out on Monday, but whilst we have you here, Mike, I'd like to bring up the story. As the headlines say, Lloyds Bank criticised after refusing letter in Welsh from AM. I don't know if you'd like to lead on it.
Certainly, yeah. It was relatively simple. My daughter's going to university in Bangor. She wanted to upgrade her bank account with Lloyds from the bank account she's got now to a student bank account. And for that, you have to bring proof that you are going to be a student. We took her proof, which was her UCAS offer, but the UCAS offer was in Welsh. She's studying Welsh and music at Bangor, so hardly surprising the offer came in Welsh. And when we were told, well, we can't accept it in Welsh, we can only accept it in English. Can you go back to them and ask them for an English copy?
So how did you feel when...
Well, shouldn't it have been bilingual anyway?
Well, they tend to send only one letter out. That's a UCAS decision. It has nothing to do with me or Bangor University. It's a UCAS decision. They send it out. They only send it out in one language. And for people studying Welsh, they tend to send it out in Welsh.
Automatically, you'd think, because obviously she speaks Welsh.
So, but we took it there, and they said, well, we can't accept it. It has to be the English version. And our belief was that it was a document which had been produced by a public body, and that the bank should accept it in Welsh. And they've now decided they will accept them in Welsh. They even said it was their policy to accept them in Welsh. So something had gone wrong with this communication. I just think very pleased to see that they will now accept them in Welsh, yes. Because I think that we are a two-language country. My Welsh is not very good, but I do try, and I think it really is important that we give people the opportunity to use Welsh, and certainly Welsh documents. And we didn't have to have the discussion in Welsh. We just wanted them to accept a document from an institution in England, actually, UCAS, in Welsh. And now they've accepted they will, so it's a win situation.
Of course, banks are having a bad time at the moment. They're closing, I think it's on average of 10 a day. And people are asking, well, what if you have to go to your bank? Where is the nearest bank going to be? I mean, it's all right if you live in Swansea, but if you're out in the country, and Wales is a rural country, where do you go? I mean, after all, not all people are able to bank online.
That's true, definitely.
And So banks are struggling in that respect.
We must say the bank has apologised, and like you said, they will now accept bilingual, the Welsh and the English. But realistically, they should have had somebody there that could have read it, and hopefully that may be in the future.
I don't think we really needed somebody in there who read it. All we wanted is somebody to take it off us and say, we will come back to you.
Yes, thank you so much.
We'll have to bring this to an end.
Yes.
See you after the break.
Welcome back to Today on Bay TV. I'm Liz Cairns and this is Keith Milward.
I am so excited because of the next guest. I'm not going to say who it is. Let's just have a look at this film. Oh, well, it's a very big star, just while the film is locking in. Very big star, yeah, Welsh star, known for musical theatre, known for bands, and very proud of him in Swansea. Let's take a look.
It's called Unfolding. And I'm right here on the table. I've a cross upon a seal. I'm not ready to be open, be unfolding. I'm in trouble, I'm a writer. I'm not saying what I feel. I would rather this would never be unfolding.
It's out of the bag. Steve Balsamo, the one and only Steve Balsamo. My
It's
God.
lovely to see you.
Well, it's great to see you, my gosh. And I see you singing there and hearing you singing. And you were told you couldn't sing in school.
That's
I was
right.
shocked when I read that.
I've got to be careful because Mrs. Richards might be listening.
Oh.
And years ago, when I had a recording contract with Sony Records, and when they write a little piece for you to kind of send out to all the press people, the fella they brought in to kind of interview me said, "Oh, can you tell me anything interesting about your childhood?" I was like, "Well, I wasn't allowed to sing in the school choir." And he said, "Who said that?" And I said, "Oh, Mrs. Richards." And he wrote it down. It went out on every TV show.
Oh my
So much
gosh.
so that, God love her, Mrs. Richards called my mum and said, "Can you ask Steve not to keep saying it?" And I said, "I only said it once."
Oh, dude, I've said it now, so there we are.
Oh, but I still see her now. We ended up on a show with Davina McCall. Talking about, it was embarrassing, but I still see her now and she's lovely.
Oh, bless.
But of course, I'm itching to talk about the musical theatre side of things, you know, and I remember the time when you got the part of Jesus Christ Superstar in London. And I remember you telling us that you had 14 auditions.
That's right.
Please tell us more.
Well, because I was in Neath College doing performing arts, and very soon after joining, Rhian Lloyd, who I'm doing a show for tonight,
Yes, in
we'll
Neath.
talk about later, she told me bring him home from Les Miserables, and I went along to an audition literally a couple of months later. I got in. So I'd been away for 18 months or so, and the fella who became one of my best mates, Jonathan Greatorex, he was one of the cast. He then decided to become an agent, and a few years later he rang and said, "Listen, they're looking for a Jesus. Can you still sing Gethsemane?" Because I did a performance of it at Neath College. I said, "Yeah, I'll give it a go." Haven't sung it for a while, so I sang it. He called the casting guy, David Grinrod, for Webber's company and said, "If you see this guy, you're going to cast him," which is massive talk considering I'd only done a chorus part in Les Mis. So I remember going to the first audition with David and singing, and he started crying, in a good way, I think.
Oh, yeah.
He started crying, and I thought, "Oh, this is interesting." And he called Johnny and said, "Look, he hasn't had any experience. We can't give him the gigs. He's had no experience." So they kept bringing me back, and then I met Gail, Gail Edwards, who's the director. And then they kept bringing me back and try this, try that, because they didn't know I was an unknown, quantity. They didn't know if I'd freak out after a week or, which I did, but that's another story. And you know, it was a very long process, but they wanted to make sure that
14 auditions.
It was at least 14.
Whoa! I just think I've got a theory myself. I think they couldn't believe the 3.5 octave range voice that you've got, and kept asking you back because they couldn't believe it in the first place.
Well, I looked, you know, I've still got the hair and I had the beard and
Could do it again now.
Well, funny enough, I keep getting asked to go and, you know, I'm too old to do that sort of thing, and I've got kids. It's a very different thing. I think being in a show like that, especially that I've just been asked if I'd entertain the thought of maybe doing it again in Europe.
But let's just remind ourselves, let's see and hear you in action.
I only want to say, if there is a way, take this cup away from me, for I don't want to taste its poison. Feel it burn me. I have changed. I'm not as sure as when we started. Then I was inspired. Now I'm sad and tired. Listen, surely I've exceeded expectations. Tried for 3 years, seems like 30. Could you ask as much from any other man?
How did you feel when you did your first performance?
This still brings tears to my eyes, actually. It was a lot of pressure, you know. And the cast that we had, I mean, it was 20 years ago, so it was a long time ago. The cast we had was made up of great actors. I mean, the guy who was playing Judas opposite me, an amazing actor called Zubin Vala. He had, just before that, was playing Romeo for the RSC. So these guys knew their stuff, and I was coming from bands, rock and roll in Swansea. You know, I could sing it, and I looked like Jesus, or the Western kind of idea of what Jesus was. But the pressure was amazing.
Well, all I can remember is that you were trained in Neath College, and I came to see you in Jesus Christ Superstar, playing the lead, and I paid £3. And then 2 or 3 years later, in the West End, I was paying £33 to see you. Yes, and yet you're back today. You're back, and you're in concert tonight in Neath. So tell us more about that.
Well, Rian, who taught me at Neath College, has an amazing young choir called Allegro. And she called me a few months ago and said, would you come and sing a few songs? And I said, as long as you don't ask me to sing that song, that one.
Yes.
And she said, oh, will you? I went, oh, I've hung up my loincloth. So, but I said, yeah, I'll come and do a few songs. And so we've had a few rehearsals. It sounds great. So it's St. David's Church tonight. It's for Tea Haven. It's in, raising some money for that. And the choir, 7 o'clock, the choir is absolutely brilliant. They all sound beautiful.
I got to ask, how does your daughter, because I know your son is really young, he's 5, but your daughter's 12. So how does she feel about her dad having such an amazing past as well? But will she be coming tonight as well? Does she follow you music-wise?
It's funny. She's at an age where whatever I do is uncool.
Yeah.
And funny enough, she goes to Goyer. She's in Welsh school. She goes to Goyer school. And the music teacher was, when she first went there last year, he was going through the register. Isabella Balsamo, are you in relation to Steve? She went, maybe.
Oh,
but of course, many of us know you because of the work with bands as well, and the stories, and you've worked with such greats.
Oh, wow. Well, the band The Stories, I'm very proud of. All set up with all boys from Swansea, all singer-songwriters. We ended up touring around the world. The famous story of The Stories was I got a call from Elton John, who'd heard our first album and absolutely loved it. And we ended up touring with him for 3 summers. Then we toured with Joe Cocker, played shows with Celine Dion and Katie Malou, who was brilliant. You know, we had an amazing journey with that. But in the meantime, I was a singer with John Lord, who was one of the founder members of Deep Purple. And John passed away, unfortunately, a few years ago. One of the best kind of musicians in the kind of rock and roll world, really, and really respected. So I ended up touring around the world with big orchestras with John, and it was just an amazing experience, and learning so much from his experience, because he was there at the beginning of kind of rock and heavy rock music. And it's full circle, because Interestingly, Ian Gillan, the singer with Deep Purple, was the original singer with on Jesus Christ Superstar, the concept album.
Well, what I remember,
Total full circle.
what I remember is the headlines in the newspapers when you played the part and stole the show in London was that the headline said, "The Son of God is Welsh." Of course he is, isn't he? Of course he is.
As long as he's the centre of the universe, everyone should know that.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you, Steve.
So
we
welcome.
very much hope you will be back with us at a later stage. But thank you very, very much.
Thank you so
And
much.
after the break, we'll be talking to John Hill from the University St David's, Trinity St David's. Welcome back to Bay TV. I'm Keith Milward, and this is Liz Cairns, and we're now going to be talking to John Hill from the University of Wales, Trinity St David's. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
So, John, can you explain? You're here to reveal the new launch of the new course that's going to be hopefully by 2018.
Hopefully by 2018.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a world exclusive for Bay TV. We've been looking for about 18 months of developing a set design course, mainly because across the UK there are maybe 10 other universities that do that type of course. In Wales, 2 or 3, and because of places like Bad Wolf, Bay TV studios, there's a huge opportunity for students to actually go into that industry.
Definitely.
And we've had a history of, we've run film courses, VFX courses, animation courses for years. So students have kind of naturally graduated into doing little bits and pieces and elements of set design. So we suddenly thought, right, okay, let's bite the bullet, let's research it. And it's just been validated by the university, so it's all set to go.
Brilliant. Because like you said, there's so much media around now, and with like the large companies, and so many films have been made around here, especially in Swansea. To be able to be, maybe some of them, you students would actually be able to be part of that in the future would be amazing, or even to be able to go and to volunteer just to see and things. I think would be really
we all know that
opportunity.
Doctor Who's been filmed here, and Torchwood, and many other very popular programmes. So.
And when we were piecing it together, it wasn't just the case of a bunch of sort of academics thinking, oh, yes, this is a good idea. So we consulted, we put together industry liaison groups. So we're speaking to people like Ed Thomas, who's kind of really sort of world-famous sort of set designer, got his input on it. Basically to say, you know, if we've got graduates come out of this programme, what would you like them to be able to do? How could they contribute to the industry?
Because there's also a big difference, I'm assuming, from theatre set to then TV set.
Yeah, TV and film and theatre, in theory it's all under the umbrella of set design, but there are quite different dynamics involved, with particularly between theatre and film.
So would they have to have a choice then, or would they be able to learn about both and then move on?
Well, the underpinning skills in the first year are about all those skills. It's about drawing, it's about location, it's about interpreting scripts, it's about, to a certain degree, kind of working with actors and research, really. So they'd be well equipped to go into theatre. We've got a sister course that's more specifically theatre design in Carmarthen as well. Right. So there's going to be some really nice links and stuff forged with them.
We've got a lovely video for the viewers, if they'd like to have a look, then to learn a bit more.
Sure.
Let's have a look.
Where rivers flow backwards, and I'll look back through bridges to everything. Everything I said. As the days grew longer, it was never enough for me. So with open eyes, I see the things that hide from me. Every day is a little closer to something I can reach. And there's more to you than what meets the eye.
So that very first part we saw was actually built here, you said?
It was filmed in this very studio.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was set up for
It's hard to believe.
So I spent a long time building it, and a very short space time smashing it apart.
And to be with Steve, you have a background in art, I believe, didn't you?
I came to this is on the old Deneva School campus, this part of the university, and I came here. And I'm very interested in the idea of regeneration, how kind of the ghosts of the past, if you like, kind of can influence what goes on today. I'm very into that whole idea and that concept. And so the idea of space and you know, when you go into a church or you go into something that's had thousands of years of kind of prayer, it's almost if something kind of moves you and Is it the place itself?
Spirit, yes.
Yeah. So I'd ask you, John, does the place conjure that? Does the kind of the shape of it, the geometry of it do that? Or does it, or do you think it's
so. I think particularly
the resonance?
I think it's probably both, and particularly with this idea of maybe trying to communicate that to kind of students. When somebody's watching it on film, it's kind of that sensibility. That's what's got to be communicated, really. You know, when you do, I was in, a couple of weeks ago, Durham Cathedral, which I'd never been to before.
Amazing place.
I'm not an overtly religious person, but you walk in and it was absolutely, my heart was pumping like that. Beautiful. And it was, you know, it was the gravity of the place you walked into. So one of the things I suppose set design has got to help do is evoke that process, work with directors, work with actors, and really kind of try and get that sort of sense of place across.
And on screen, would you say that CGI versus the real thing, is there a tangible difference? Or is CGI so good now that you can't even tell?
There's a very interesting theory. It's called the uncanny valley in CGI. And what that is, it's particularly refers to people's faces. That if you play like PlayStation games or whatever, they're so realistic now, but the closer you get to human reality, the less people trust. And that's the uncanny valley, is this dip off. So things like Charlie Brown characters, it's fine, they're just kind of people, that's quite good. Yes. But the closer you get to looking like a human, people don't like it. And it's possibly the same with CGI backgrounds. There's been a bit of a backlash to it over the last couple of years, and people want real stuff. So one of the things that we're trying to do on this degree is integrate green screen, blue screen backgrounds into already established environments. So it could be somewhere on the Gower, it could be Geneva in Llandilo, it could be anywhere like that. So you actually kind of augment those spaces, you kind of set dress them with different things. So it's not just 100% reliant on CGI.
Wow.
And making stuff as well, I think.
So what type of students are you hoping to inspire? Because some may just automatically think they're looking at theatre or they're looking at media, but not necessarily have actually thought of going into set design. How are you going to manage to capture them?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if you like, there's a traditional market, which is foundation art and design students, national department, who've done art design. But equally, we would welcome students who've done history at A-level.
Right.
So they look at the kind of research of things, building that. We'd be interested in people who were interested in window dressing, set dressing, interior design, costume, all those sorts of things. And particularly, I think, we're very interested in mature students as well. We've had a couple of approaches from people who are actually set designers in the industry and want to come back and kind of get a qualification. And the interesting thing about that is that there's a thing that the university has called APL, which is the Accreditation of Prior Learning. So chances are when they came into the first year, they would know more than me about the subject, which is great. So they get credit for having worked in the industry. So maybe they could go into the second year or the third year or something like that. So we're just looking to take a huge mix of people and see what happens, really.
Yeah, definitely. So within the course, you're going to need obviously quite large spaces, would you say? Are people actually going to be building these sets or on campus, or are you going to have somewhere else to build these sets? Because obviously some may want them to be large. Or...
Yeah. There's a mixture of stuff. So it's going to start from the drawing processes and the research processes you need to go to look into steampunk, Elizabethan stuff, Game of Thrones type stuff, which is very popular at the moment. The next phase of it is models in white. So you actually kind of propose what the set design looks like. That's very similar to kind of theatre at that point. But also we want to go further than most other degrees do, where there are tremendous facilities here and studio spaces to actually realise these things. So we're looking at modules in... we've got a film lab up and running, so students can actually kind of build in there, but also working out in locations as well, and actually building out in locations.
Brilliant. And I'm assuming that's using coordinated and green screen as well may help then with the sizing.
Oh yeah. Every bit of technology we can lay our hands on.
Sounds really exciting.
Oh, it sounds a wonderful course. What opportunities are available on our very doorstep?
I know. And look forward to hearing more.
And we want to thank all our guests for their input today on the lovely programme.
And later on, next on Bay TV, we have our afternoon matinee movie. And today, it's the 1943 comedy, It's in the Bag.